And I will say that like I'm ashamed of myself as an American.
And when Congress votes for a specific legislation, they take into account the will of the people in their states, in their districts.
We haven't given nearly as much as what people think, and a lot of that is paying back into our own country's national defense system.
We are going to criticize Mr. Trump just as much as we criticized Mr. Biden.
Yeah.
Can you imagine United States helping the Great Britain allies during Second World War and in the same time buying oil or other resources from Nazi Germany?
Right. Great analogy.
Let's face it, no one ever discussed a serious plan for Ukraine winning this war. If you if you were paying attention, he keeps on mentioning that, oh, today thousands of people have died. But
Hmm.
he doesn't say how many of them are Russians, how many of them are Ukrainians. And perhaps this is the most scariest thing about Russians. Not their size,
Yeah.
not their economy, not their
Hmm.
the
Yes.
ease with which they kill their own people.
Hmm.
That's really devastating for Europe.
It's sick. It's sick. They better wake up, start drinking their coffee more and get going on their GDP increases and their industry. And that's what Trump should be doing. The Ukrainians recognize more than anyone else in Europe the value of self-sufficiency and the necessity, at least the ones who want to preserve this state. It's in Russian people's best interest if Russia fails as a state. And we are doing Russian people a disservice as well by turning our back on our ally. And I would say, and many people would say, aligning with Russia by pulling military aid from Ukraine because
The Republican Party is effectively split between those who support
Mhm.
Ukraine and those who don't. The supporters of Ukraine, we need to encourage them to be public. This is the most important thing we can do today. Encourage people like Don Bacon, for example, to be out there more, speak about it. Hello and welcome to Protect Ukraine Now YouTube channel. This video is a conversation with a friend of mine, Alex. She's also an advocate for Ukraine, and in this recording, we cover a lot of good talk points for the next time you guys too talk to your congresspeople, senators, you write them letters, or otherwise communicate your thoughts about Ukraine. This video is a little long, but I hope you find it important and interesting. Thank you for watching. Hi, Alex. Good to see you. It has
Good to see
been a while.
you. Yes, we just came from DC and we're advocating for military aid, and then everything blew up after that.
I know, right? So I was really hoping that coming back from Washington, we'll be recording happy videos about the various meetings we had on the Hill, how successfully those went, and so on, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. It's the fact that Trump pulled military aid and intel from Ukraine has been like a huge betrayal for like our relations, not only between our politicians, but our people. And I will say that like I'm ashamed of myself as an American, and this is not a representation of what the people in both of our countries want. It's a huge betrayal.
Absolutely. And in many ways, with the new administration, I feel like it's a deja vu time. Things like we going through same conversations we had to go through initially when the big war just broke out. In a sense, it is a good opportunity to remind the new administration why Americans support Ukraine, why Ukraine matters, and certainly there's there's certain there's certain ideas or positions that President Trump takes that we need to contradict. like one of them, for example, is that somehow Americans need to get paid back. This just been an example, right? So this is fallacy. This is not how that deal was orchestrated. You can agree or disagree with President Biden administering the aid. You can agree or disagree with a Congress who voted for that assistance. But what's important to remember, the Congress acted on the will of American people. Most Americans support they continue to support Ukraine, military assistance to Ukraine specifically. And when Congress votes for a specific legislation, they take into account the will of the people in their states, in their districts. So it's not like it's a president's decision to spend the money on, in this case, Ukraine.
Absolutely. Like this is an absolute hijack of American policy. It's going backwards and downhill. It's not a representation of the people. And even if it is, I think that there's pretty much a very strong propaganda faction, a machine going on in our country, misrepresenting what's going on with foreign aid in Ukraine. And that's causing confusion. That's causing hatred, to be honest, in between our people, because people are curmudgeonly saying that, we're going broke and it's because of Ukraine. Meanwhile, you and I have been analyzing the budget for years now, and you've been showcasing that to the public. We haven't given nearly as much as what people think, and a lot of that is paying back into our own country's national defense system as we speak. And not only that, but it's a complete if you think that Biden was weak on Ukraine, this took a complete downhill turn. Like this is like absolutely just like canning and throwing everything away, disregarding all the gains and the opportunities and solutions that we have before us to continue the fight and to put Russia in its place and be strong on the world stage. Yet we're getting handed to the public by people like Tulsi Gabbard that peace through strength means being strong enough to make peace. Is that what we mean by peace through strength?
Absolutely no. This is not what Reagan had in mind. But that's obviously his policy. I'm glad you mentioned President Biden because this is a good time to compare the two presidents. And by the way, our previous video, and we just talked about it, got a lot of hard time, a lot of criticism. Well, somewhat, right? Some people came to criticize our position back then when uh, I don't think we ever, I need to rewatch that video, but I don't think we ever promoted Trump as the savior of Ukraine. We mostly criticized Biden. And for those people, for everyone else out there, we are going to criticize Mr. Trump just as much as we criticized Mr. Biden. Uh,
Absolutely.
Democracy is this process where people hold their elected officials accountable. It's not like we elect a president and then for the next 4 years, we're kind of done, right? There's nothing we can do. This is absolutely not the case. Again, we criticize Biden, and we criticize Biden because he spoke the right words. He said everything
Hmm.
correctly, and really, if you were to listen to him, he was mostly correct. And while obviously you can always find something you could disagree with, in general, he was very much on the point. The problem, though, with President Biden's policy was that he never had in mind um, a victory for Ukraine. He never provided enough weapons and in sufficient quality and quantity, and that resulted in the war taking now over 3 years. So if the weapons, and looking back, I can say in summer or fall of 2022, somewhere in that range, there was a good opportunity for Ukraine to take back the territory, mainly because Russians were unprepared.
Right.
And if Ukraine had initiative, and
Hmm.
if they received also enough munitions at the time, this war could be over by now. And that's on President Biden. Now, comparing him to
Absolutely.
Trump, Mr. Trump doesn't even pretend he wants to help Ukraine. And in many ways, that makes it easy. Mr. Trump is very easy to criticize. Everyone is happy to criticize Trump. So that was real hard with Biden. Very difficult to get advocates to speak up against Biden. We had to find very carefully formulated phrases so that
Right.
so that point is not interpreted as we anti-Biden, anti-Ukraine, and so on. Right? So very hard to.
It's just
But
still, I
it's
still get
politics very hard to play.
I still get crap for criticizing him from Democrats. And I mean, but that's what the history is. Biden slow rolled the weapons, okay? And we're hoping that Trump would come in and yeah, he did not pretend anything. Like he was very ambiguous. I'm a Republican. I personally didn't vote for him. I voted for actually an American. I wrote in my candidate an American who wasn't even running, who's serving in the military. But like Trump, like I was not going to put my trust in him because he made no promises. And but even if he like even if I did, and for all the people who did vote for Trump, they should like not be getting crap, but like instead, like give us an opportunity to talk to this president, talk to people, and like try and
Let me clarify this point a little bit. Republican voters who support Ukraine, they are our friends, and we should treat them as an asset and not as an enemy. They advocate with us, they call their senators, their representatives, and we should be treating them with respect, no matter how we feel about their voting record with respect to them helping elect President Trump.
right, like we should not be attacking each other and infighting each other as like people, Democrat versus Republican. We just need to try and hold the leaders accountable. So I think that I completely agree with that.
And that's what we do as advocates for Ukraine. We pick up the phone, we call our congressmen, we call our senators, we meet with them, and we make sure they know where our priorities are. Now, let's talk a little bit about Trump. So, agree or disagree? I, for example, disagree with his position, but also I think it's important
Yeah.
to understand where he possibly comes from. Even when we disagree, again,
Hmm.
I think it's important to look at other sides' perspective. So, number one, Europe created that monster, and that, by the way, something that many people, myself including, see and agree with. Europe continues to buy natural resources from Russia.
Yep.
In fact, to this day, it's what, March 2025, right? March 10, 2025. Europe continues to buy natural resources from Russia to a greater amount than military assistance or any other assistance for that matter to Ukraine. So imagine this. With one hand, Europe gives money to Russia, so Russia can convert that money into weapons that later go into Ukraine. With the other hand, Europe helps Ukraine. So
Hmm.
that's a problem, and
Oh yeah.
this has to stop. This is not a real war when you're helping both sides.
No.
Can you imagine United States helping the Great Britain allies during Second World War, and in the same time buying oil or other resources from Nazi Germany? That
Right.
that
Great analogy. We need to choke out Russia. Europe needs to choke out Russia. Europe's 20% of Europe's uh gas imports and energy imports is still Russia. And they're building Russia, they've been in talks for years trying to move this through, and Russia's paying a lot of money into the Pax nuclear plant in Hungary. And meanwhile, they occupy Zaporizhia. I'd be terrified to have like literally like a terrorist who's willing to occupy a power plant be then building one over there in Europe right next to Ukraine. It's ridiculous. Like Europe is absolutely hypocritical. So I do agree with you on that. Like we need to follow through and choke out Europe, choke out the energy. And I thought that that's what the Trump administration, that was one of their game plans with the LNG imports replacing the European industry during the admin shift. And
So here, I believe the jury is still out. It hasn't been long enough for Trump to make all these transitions. From what I have heard, he's open to selling Europeans everything Europeans are ready to buy, including LNG. I also He also pointed out a number of times that Europe is again continues to buy natural resources from Russia. Perhaps now that there's been out discussed openly. And that's, by the way, another reason I think we need to be bringing that up. Like those of us who have connections, relatives, or friends in Europe, they should know that this is a big problem and they should be talking to their governments over there, advocating for changing their suppliers. Second
absolutely.
thing that I believe Trump is concerned about is Ukraine. So I I, I prefer not to criticize Ukraine publicly, but at the same time, we understand that there are so many things over there that can be better. For once, Ukraine is very late and very slow into building its own military, and uh, specifically weapons production. So Ukraine has done excellent work, and that's not government, that's private sector. They have done excellent work with unmanned aircrafts. They really revolutionized that field and really took the war to a different level. And from that perspective, the United States is missing on a great opportunity to collaborate with Ukrainians and learn
For sure. We're
the
missing out.
specifics of unmanned aircraft drone warfare.
We have to be in on
And that's,
that.
by the way, so since we're discussing Trump, that's a problem with him. He doesn't see that opportunity. He doesn't see the great advances that Ukraine has made. He probably mostly gets to see the things that are not working out quite well over there. For example, there's so
Yeah.
the problem with conscript. He mentioned that even during this now infamous discussion, debate, argument, debacle at the Oval Office, he did say about problems with recruitment for Ukraine. And he also, I'm thinking, aware of the level of corruption that is unfortunately still there at Ukraine. And all that together, he is not confident that Ukraine has a plan because let's face it, no one ever discussed a serious plan for Ukraine winning this war. Everything and all we heard so far was along the lines of we need security guarantees, we need to be accepted into NATO, and other very vague terms that imply that Ukraine wants to rely on the West in continuing the war effort. Trump wants to see what Ukraine is going to do itself. And at least that's one of my understandings. Now, where Trump is really missing is on their problems for the United States and the rest of the world if Russia is going to win in Ukraine. And I think this is really it is the most important thing that the West needs to worry about right now. Really, the big question here, and I think again, déjà vu moment, right? So we already talked about it so many times. And the question is, can Russia lose? True or false? Because if you listen to J.D. Vance or President Trump for that matter, Russia is a huge country. Ukraine is a small country. Russia has so many people, so much weapons, so great and big economy compared to Ukraine. There's no way that a big country can lose to a small country. So they start with a statement that Russia cannot lose this war. And I think that's really the starting point to most conversations we can have on the Hill and between ourselves and any person that we would like to advocate for Ukraine, right? So, Alex, can Russia lose? And if it's true, let's just, for example, uh, let's consider for a second. Let's entertain this idea. What is the world is going to look like if Russia truly cannot lose?
I think it would be really scary because, first of all, I think Russia can lose. And but I certainly don't think that they could win with the Ukrainians fighting and wearing them down and their resilience. And Russia's needed to tap into North Korea. And with the US backing Ukraine and giving the support that we finally should give them after what we've been asking for 3 years now, that yeah, Ukraine can, in with the US and true Western support, choke out Russia and put it in its place. So I absolutely think that's a possibility. And I think there's a lot of possibilities, and I'm just not buying it. This DC kind of indoctrination that we're getting from the admin that that Ukraine can't regain all of its territory. I know it's very difficult, and the longer that it goes on, it makes it even worse. But at the same time, I'm just not buying they're telling us we're naive and that this is just not possible, but they're not considering the plethora of options and advantages that Ukraine has been working on and innovating and developing defense-wise, and the low-hanging fruit of making sanctions actually work. If Russia does not, if Russia wins, then who is to say that they would not go after other small countries? I mean, this is an absolute precedent. And and it's as simple as that. And there's just it just is so real that there's just no stopping this tomorrow if we don't stop it today.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. And if for a second we entertain this idea that Russia cannot lose, that's a huge, especially if we entertain that idea in 2025, right? After 3 years of Ramstein, remember Ramstein's military base in Europe in the beginning of the war. There are so many talks about this great, awesome coalition that included 53 countries or something. Just for a reference, I believe this is the same number of countries that allied against Nazi Germany in during the World War II. So that comparison was used in the past. Imagine in 2025 admitting that after all the effort, combined effort of
Right.
Europe, United States, Canada, even Australia, I believe, chipped in just a little bit to help Ukraine, Japan, South Korea, all of those countries helped Ukraine to some degree. And after all these years, we're just going to admit that all this effort is to no use. That's a
Yeah.
huge reputation damage, and it's a complete reset of defense, security, everything that
Yes.
everything that is worldwide. is known as Pac Americana.
It's
It's
like we've been living a facade this whole time and just psych, that would all could never happen. It's like, yeah, of course it could. And imagine if everybody put in more and stop making it so difficult.
right. Now, another fallacy is that Ukraine is losing this war, and of course, I'm referring to recent conversations again, Oval Office two Fridays ago, right? And other hints that we hear from the White House admin. This is absolutely not true. The situation on the front remains very difficult. However, the situation is fairly balanced. In fact, if we look at a deep state map, this is a resource that shows exact positions of Russian troops on the Ukrainian territory. If you look at the map and you play it through the time, you're going to see that the front line, if you again looking at the map of Ukraine, is very stable. Of course, we know that villages and even bigger cities like Mariupol, for example, were lost to Russians, and we also know that some territory was gained back, right? Another, and so, but again, mostly the front line is stable. So
Hmm.
Russia is so much bigger and so much powerful than Ukraine. That line should be quickly moving west. Uh,
Hmm.
I believe some people calculated that the front line at the moment is moving slower than a snail pace. So, of course, if you compare it over like the period of time that the war carries on.
Interesting.
Another very important point to make, and again, this is all a counter argument that Russia is winning this war. Another very important point: the war is not about kilometers or miles, whatever your preference, that you occupied or deoccupied. It's all about your opponent's resources that you have consumed,
Hmm.
be it equipment, money, or their troops, right? Military personnel. In that respect, Ukraine is far more efficient than Russia. Now, it could be more efficient, and for Ukraine to be confidently winning this war, they need probably 1 to 10 ratio, which is not the case. But I want to say that Ukraine is at least 1 to 4, 1 to 5 ratio compared to Russians. So they're far more efficient in killing the enemy than Russians are. And this is something that, again, I don't think President Trump ever considers. I think if you if you were paying attention, he keeps on mentioning that, oh, today thousands of people have died, but
Hmm.
he doesn't say how many of them are Russians, how many of them are Ukrainians.
Right. And should that also be d deciding factor for how in the middle we as a country are. Personally, I think that like we should be all on the side of Ukraine, like based off sheer precedent and alliance and history and the fact that Russia is a historical enemy. But if you look at the actual advantage, the operational advantage, and compare it with Trump's point of view of like being kind of like, trying to take a realistic approach to the realities of war, why would he not recognize the advantage that Ukraine has? And more so, the advantage that we have, the very many national security advantages that we have. And we really, somebody said the other day, a Ukrainian woman said, we need you. We need you. Europe needs Ukraine, and the US needs Ukraine.
Oh, Europe definitely needs Ukraine. The truth of the matter is, Europe doesn't have armed forces that can defend Europe successfully. I believe Europe is somewhere around 80 brigades. How many of them are combat ready? God knows.
Wow.
Yeah, it could be 60%, could be less. It's very hard to tell. As comparison, so 80 brigades Europe, Ukraine is 112, 100 something 13, I don't know, somewhere around that range. So Ukrainian army is not only much bigger or significantly bigger than Europe's, they're already trained and they're ready to fight this very brutal war. I'm not sure if German burghers are ready to move into Ukrainian trenches and fight the war that Ukraine is fighting today. There be no restrooms over there, no warm showers, nothing that our NATO military is so accustomed to these days.
They better
Also,
get ready at this
mhm,
pace because we're abandoning Ukraine under Trump right now.
yeah,
Or
and,
at least, I mean, this is significant. This policy is just unbelievable what he's done to pull military support from Ukraine. If I was in Europe, I'd be freaking out.
and they are, Alex, they are because Russia is 220 brigades and they going to be throwing people into that meat grinder as if there's no tomorrow. They really don't, Russians or Russian government, I should say, they really don't value human life. And perhaps this is the most scariest thing about Russians. Not their size,
Yeah.
not their economy, not their
Hmm.
the
Yes.
ease with which they kill their own people.
Hmm.
That's really devastating for Europe. They not ready to fight this kind of war. So yes, Europe absolutely needs Ukraine to stop Russia. And this is a shame that they really giving peanuts to Ukraine at this point. Uh, really not equipping Ukraine properly to resist Russia. And with Europe, we're going to have more of a Biden administration. At least that's my
Yeah.
feeling. There'll be a lot of uh, awesome conversations taking
Right.
place.
Parades,
Like,
shows,
mhm.
congratulations. Every time they send a
There'll be
weapon.
amazing support from France, Germany, United Kingdom. If you listen to Macron, you probably can go to bed after watching his address and feel confident that Europe got it and they're going to support Ukraine
Right.
militarily. But then you look at actual numbers, and I think there was a military aid package recently announced by France, something to a tune of $240 million, which in modern war terms is really nothing.
Right.
It's a very
Just a
very sad amount.
few missiles.
Um, Also, Prime Minister of United Kingdom, Starmer, also he goes to a podium and he talks about challenging times and how Europe has to stand together and how we need to, or they need rather, to invest in their military. And then he's announcing the increase in military spending by United Kingdom, and the number is 2.3, they're going to go from 2.3% of GDP to
Right.
0.5% of GDP in 2 or 3 years, something. So
Oh
2020.
my God.
So
This is
0.2% increase in GDP in military spending, and that's what Europe is going to be actually doing to improve their military readiness. Uh, Russia is putting like 40% of their GDP, if I'm correct, um, into military.
It's sick. It's sick. They better wake up, start drinking their coffee more and get going on their GDP increases and their industry. And that's what Trump should be doing. But what? By pulling Ukraine aid support, That's not putting any leverage on Europe. That's basically saying, bye guys, we're not a reliable partner. We just knee-jerk reaction pull support. And Europe already cozied up to Russia's energy sector is going to say, screw it. Let's just like sell out to Russia. And do you think that Ukrainians are going to do that? I don't think so. And most people in Europe, I do think, are very supportive of Ukrainians. Their decision making is not synonymous to what we need for international security. And when I was in Ukraine, Ukrainians are saying they want to become more self-sufficient. The Ukrainians recognize more than anyone else in Europe the value of self-sufficiency and the necessity, at least the ones who want to preserve this state. And yes, that is very much a strong sentiment in Ukraine, and we should be supporting that, not punishing it by yanking support. And
So
and this is the precedent that we set when a country wants to become more self-sufficient and develop their drone system or stand up against a brutal dictator. What type of example does this give to the rest of Europe? Just screw it and sell out and let Europe become Russia?
remember the $350 billion of Russian assets that are frozen, or 300, is it 300 billion frozen Russian assets
Mhm.
in Europe? Why
Yeah.
can't Europe transfer or use that money to build more military equipment for
What's
itself?
going on with that chunk of change that they just sit on? It's just come on, guys. They're so it's so
Oh,
corrupt.
and I tell you why, because in the back of their minds, they thinking what's going to happen if they need to normalize their relationship with Russia, and Russia is going to demand that money back,
Yeah.
and if that money is gone, they can't pay it back, and this is their plan B. They not ready to stand their ground on the fact that this money is reparation, if you will, and this money that's going to be used against aggressor. And this really one of the biggest problems out there. It is a moral problem for sure, but we do not treat Russia the way we should treat aggressors. Russia is not France or Belgium or like Australia. It's not just another country we're going to talk to in the same friendly way. They are aggressors. They are killing people. They're raping women. They're murdering children, elderly, and they would do that same thing to us
Oh,
if we
they
were
hate
in their
us.
way, and they could do it. They could.
Just so everybody knows, like especially Tulsi Gabbard, because she thinks that we're in the middle. She thinks that we can make peace. Russia is American enemy. And I have Russian friends, I have family in Russia, and they will tell it to your face. Russia hates America. America's our enemy. And and we're gonna let this state who deep sea doctrinates their nation to hate us take over Europe. It won't be good for us. It
Just
won't be
just
good
to
for
be
us.
fair, there are good people in Russia, but they mostly enjoying this war. I have seen a graph somewhere that was depicting the popularity of current regime in Russia over time, and you could see how every time the Putin starts a new war, his popularity goes up. 2008, Russia goes into Georgia, popularity goes up. 2014, Russia takes Crimea, popularity of Putin goes up.
It's the only thing keeping the Russian nation
2022,
together.
same thing. So
It's
so
invasion.
this war is supported by most Russians.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that needs to be very clearly
Yeah.
understood.
And many of us have Russian friends. I have Russian friends,
So,
and
so do I.
but
I mean, they're great people over there. It's a
only the ones that denounce the war. Only the ones. That's the only. only people I cannot be friends with anybody who supports Russia at all. And my Russian friends in the US and in my family in Russia disagree with President Trump that Vladimir Putin is not a dictator and that the US should be neutral on Russia. It's in Russian people's best interest if Russia fails as a state. And we are doing Russian people a disservice as well by turning our back on our ally. And I would say, and many people would say, aligning with Russia by pulling military aid from Ukraine because that's what Russia wants. That's what's been the whole messaging from Tucker Carlson vicariously through Putin is to pull military aid for Ukraine. And we gave it to Russia. We aligned with Russia. The US aligned with Russia. What would you say about that?
This alignment goes back to what I just talked about, namely treating Russia like just yet another country that we want to deal with because we have economic or other trade interests. Uh, this is
Cross business
this is
ties, you
this is
mean?
un this is unacceptable, and I think we all need to remember that when we do business with uh, people who effectively are enemies, what we do is we empower them to do harm to us at some later time. So uh, I think Alex, you're young, you probably don't remember that, but I'm an old guy. I still remember those times when we considered China as just a place where you buy a $5 t-shirt from. That's really all they were good for. Some very, very cheap plastic stuff
Hmm.
that you usually find in the dollar store, cheap t-shirts and some cables
Yeah,
for
yeah.
your electronics. That's all that really China ended up to be for us back then. At this point, this is as was recently announced, and I think it's fair, they're one of our biggest adversaries. And now we have to have a nearly $1 trillion defense budget here in the United States so that we can stand to aggressors like China and
Wow.
Russia. So think about it. At almost $1 trillion every year on defense. Imagine how many t-shirts you can get with that. So no, you certainly can save short term by buying cheap and doing business with devil, but it's going to cost you long term. And this is exactly what happens today when we consider future conflicts with China. This is exactly what happens today in Ukraine. One of the scariest talks right now talks about resetting a relationship with Russia. If you remember, in 1991, when Soviet Union fell apart and United States went in and helped Russia, and that's when really that relationship with Russia got reset last time. That was a huge mistake. And right now, Ukraine is paying for it. And we are paying for it effectively too, because we need to invest money into this war. And we're also witnessing a paradigm shift in the relationship between various countries and security and
Mhm.
defense and
Oh, yeah.
trade and
Georgia,
all
the
of that is
protests.
changing
My
and
God.
shifting. And all of this happens because we allowed our adversaries to have business with us in the same way we do it with our friends.
That's a great point. Look, if we had like not sold out to Russia in the 90s and made some weak deal and denuclearized Ukraine, imagine all of the bloodshed that could have been avoided because they would have never tried it. Ukraine would have had the leverage. And that's what would have stopped the war, not some like spooky fairy tale that Trump says that the war would have never happened under him. We'll see when what will happen under him or not. If he could really end the war, like he first said in 24 hours, now it's been a couple of months, and now he's caving in to Russia just to fulfill this fantasy, the facade. And we know the history and we know the truth and we know the facade. And if we sell out and if we don't invest in defense and if we don't invest in our allies who are willing to align with us and willing to be strong against the aggressor, then we're going to be weaker down the road and it will only promise us more wars, as we've seen. And right now, the new generation and the new blood says, no, we're not letting that happen. We see what happened after the fall of the Soviet Union, and we can't let that happen again. And too much blood has been lost for us to screw this up now. And we're screwing it up by pulling this aid. And Russia has gone, it's been bad for our guys' morale. Russia's been bombarding it like crazy. I have family there who says it's been just crazy. Like the past 2 weeks since Trump's been floating this new alignment with Russia, it's like he's wishing like death upon the country. Like it's just been complete under intense attack. It's not good. And what do you think needs to and what do you think will happen tomorrow with this deal?
Well, actually, I'm not sure. Let's not try to speculate ahead of the time. I don't want to comment the future news. We can go back and talk about it once.
I will tell you what I want to happen.
All right, go ahead.
I I think now this is like very, very layman's, but like I really think that there should be no deal unless we resume weapons delivery. We reneged on our cooperation. How is that going to make Ukraine come any closer to the table? That doesn't make sense logically. That's not bringing anybody closer to peace. So that's what I think. I'm hoping that we resume uh weapons and defense commitment and before like the US has any um inclination to profit off Ukraine's minerals. And I personally think that the US under Biden has been stringing Ukraine along and now is gonna, what, under Trump, pull the rug out from underneath its feet and screw them over and sell them out to Russia. No, 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 no. That's not a righteous end to this war. And that won't be good for our history. It won't be good for reality. Like forget about like history is like it's already bad. Like the history is already screwed up. So many people died, but we're gonna end it like this. This is absolute corruption and not aligned with the actual reality of the war.
Well, what I think we need to do, and sure, let's wrap it up a little. So here's what's going on, and I think we spent a lot of time talking about where Trump is wrong. He's not doing a good job this time with the foreign policy. I liked him better in his previous administration. He apparently had better advisors, better cabinet when it comes to foreign policy during his previous term. But where are we at right now? Uh, President Trump wants to end this war. He made that commitment. He's sticking to it. The only way to get into agreement is both parties, both sides need to agree to negotiate. Russia is not very flexible, to say the least, and Trump understands that. And instead of putting pressure on the aggressor, instead he's putting pressure on the victim, and that's another huge problem. It's wrong on so many levels, and
Especially since all of the pressure on Ukraine has been exposed in the public eye. We have no idea what's going beyond the scene behind the scenes with Russia, and that is foul play. That's not fair. It's not fair to the public, and it's definitely a boost for Russia.
And he's basing his logic on the fact that Russia is winning and he needs to end this war as soon as possible because Ukraine is going to lose all of its territory. And this is the fallacy we need to stand to and explain this is not the case. Ukraine is actually in a good parity, I would say, in a parity situation with Russia, give or take, and we can easily change the situation in favor um, for Ukraine by giving them more weapons to again at least
Yes.
stop the aggressor. And they need to be in a position where they when Russia is in a stand still position, they're not able to advance, and this is a good time for any sort of negotiations. And I'm very upset that Trump is dragging Ukraine into the negotiations when it is slowly losing territory. As I mentioned earlier, territory is not everything. It's not the most important
Hmm.
factor when you consider which side has upper hand. But this is very visible, and this is in the news, and this has to stop.
Hmm.
So the best thing, and let's again talk a little bit about conclusions because uh, our audience are our fellow advocates for Ukraine, uh, those wonderful ladies and gentlemen that go with us to DC or
Hmm.
otherwise advocate for Ukraine. So
Amazing people.
yes, absolutely. And the situation is such that the most leverage at this point is on the Republican side. The Republican Party is effectively split between those who support
Hmm.
Ukraine and those who don't. Our job is to pressure both sides to stand for Ukraine. The supporters of Ukraine, we need to encourage them to be public. This is the most important thing we can do today. Encourage people like Don Bacon, for example, to be out there more, speak about Ukraine, and I believe he's already doing that. Don Bacon, for example, but we need to be talking to other Republicans, senators, representatives who support Ukraine, Lindsey Graham, so on, right?
Yeah.
So those Republicans who do not support Ukraine for whatever reason we need to at least ask them to make their public statement on Russia. Let them at least say that they do not support what Russia is doing. Or if they choose so, they can go on publicly and confirm their alliance with Russia. I think for their constituents, that's important to hear as well. Let's let them speak the truth. Okay, so that's the best we can do today for Ukraine. I'm confident that political advocacy works. Our job is to encourage again supporters of Ukraine to stand for what they believe in. And perhaps this is also a good time to remind our friends that there is this amazing organization called American Ukraine PAC. And this is a place where you can go and you can donate to a campaign contribution, make a campaign contribution, donate to re-election campaigns of those members of Congress who support Ukraine.
Hmm.
And this is a very big and important gesture you can make. Republicans or Democrats, doesn't matter who, go find the senator or congressperson you support and donate so that they know you are doing this through American Ukraine PAC. This way, you make a lot of difference for Ukraine.
Good point and interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
Alex, anything else you want to say before we wrap up today?
Our country needs to resume military aid to Ukraine. We are using the lives of the soldiers defending the country who's out there in the trenches. We're using them as a bargaining chip, an unfair bargaining chip. And it's not the first time that Trump has done it. He's done it in 2019 when he put a supposed quid pro quo on military aid over that phone call election interference scandal. And we're having an entire repeat of that. He needs to not extort this vulnerable and valiant military and instead support them. And we need to support our allies and the defenders of Ukraine. And this is the most atrocious US policy that I've seen in my lifetime at this very moment. And we need to reverse it immediately. And I hope that our politicians in Saudi Arabia tomorrow will decide to do that.
Yeah. No,
So,
definitely what's happening today is unethical, immoral, and just for those of our listeners who perhaps think that it's a choice between what's economically beneficial to an individual or moral thing, you have to choose between one or the other, meaning doing the right thing, the moral thing is going to cost you more. This is not true either. In fact, uh, when you investing in the morale, this is a long-term investment into yourself, your communities, your children. Because
mhm,
when you promote behavior that is disgusting and unacceptable, it's going to come and haunt you at a later time. So doing the
mhm,
right thing is also investment into our own lives here in the United States. And everything everything that happens today is not accidental. It's because people have made mistakes in the past that led to this war.
mhm,
So our
mhm.
job is to recognize those mistakes and not to repeat them.
Yes, and I hope that we can quickly recognize, which is why we've been so active, which is why we're speaking out now, because we're seeing a pattern here. And I never ever want this to happen again. I never want to, and I hope my politicians don't want me to either, have to bang on their doors to have them do what we know we should be doing and supporting this military during this fight, our allies, the Ukrainians, defending their country against Russia. We need to give them the military aid and we need to show them support.
Alex, it was a pleasure seeing you and recording this conversation. Let's do it again.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
not
Thank you
wait
so
for
much.
another 6 months this time.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Good
Bye.
talking to you.
You too. Thank you.